Hello and welcome to the Patient Educators Update, where we talk about patient education in a clinical environment. I'm Chuck Jones. I'm with Synergy Broadcast, and as always, I want to welcome our guest to the show, Fran London. Hi, Fran.
Hi, Chuck.
It's good to see you this week. Our topic this week, Fran, is going to be something that I'm actually surprised we haven't talked about before, and it's going to be the difference between active learning and passive learning. And as you know, we've talked about all different kinds of learning, but somehow this was omitted, and I think it's because it was so early in your book. On page 7, you start talking about effective and efficient teaching within the time that I have, because the book is called No Time to Teach. You obviously are addressing how to be efficient and how to be effective. And I was struck by the real importance of this, and I thought it was appropriate that we go back and look at it. Your first paragraph says, research shows the most effective and efficient way to provide patient and family education is to help the learner take part in the process and individualize your teaching to his or her needs. You say involve and individualize, and I would say personalize, and that's what you really want to do. So help us understand what is passive learning or passive teaching?
Passive learning is when the learner just sits there, just listens, just reads, doesn't really get involved in anything.
Yeah.
Often you have the healthcare provider just lecturing.
Yeah, I can think of situations where I've seen my family members in the hospital, and the patient educator provides them a piece of paper and says, read this when you get home. Do you have any questions? No. How do you feel? Great. Are you ready to go home? Yes.
Yeah, that's passive learning.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, I guess active learning would be the opposite of that. Can you give us some hint of what that is?
Conversation is the easiest version. Basically, when there's some give and take, when there's some activity, when the learner gets to be involved in what's going on.
Okay. Now, you make reference in the book to passive tools. You talk about brochures and educational TV, that these are basically passive methods. So the question that I would have for you is, how do we personalize these? How do we get involvement? How do we make these active tools?
It's actually pretty easy.
Okay.
When you introduce it, you let the learner know that you're going to be talking about it after, whether it's a pamphlet or a video. If there's something specific you want them to pay attention to, point it out before they start to watch or read. And then after they're done, have the conversation. Find out what they think, how they're going to apply this information to their lives. The key is to get them involved in the process.
Yeah, because if they're not involved, there's not going to be any developmental conversations. If they're being talked to, they're going to nod their head and say, yeah, either because they don't want to appear stupid, they don't want to appear that they don't know what's going on, or it could be they just don't feel good that day and they just don't want to engage.
And engagement is the key there. Exactly. Yeah. That when there's an interaction, they're more engaged. And then the information gets put into the brain in a different kind of way when you've got some interaction going on.
Yeah, okay. All right, so let's go back to the tools right quick. Let's say that in your hospital all you have are tear sheets or handouts. And you need to get this patient ready for a procedure or something of that nature. How would you use the handout to make it more involved for that patient?
I would not hand it to them until I have at least a beginning conversation talking about what it is they're going to have to know in order to proceed. Introduce the handout when I give it to them. Before I do that, I want to make sure they know how to read.
Yeah.
Maybe point to a couple of things, highlight a couple of things, and say, focus on this, and then we're going to talk about it after. And then when they're done reading, you could do some evaluation of understanding, asking them how they would apply this information, how would they explain it to somebody else, and get them to process what it is they just learned and incorporate it into their own thoughts.
Yeah, yeah. And I would point out that the questions about how would you explain this to somebody, how would you apply this, those are teach-back methods where you want the patient to be able to convey to you what they understand and don't understand, so then you know what else is you have to do in order to help them get the learning that they need.
Yeah, something to keep in mind is that people are often stressed when they're hospitalized.
Yeah.
And just in an office being evaluated for an illness.
Mm-hmm.
And the stress makes it harder to understand things because your brain is spinning. You're thinking about other possibilities. So it really does help to engage the learner
Mm-hmm.
to get them into the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Now let's suppose that your hospital has a video-on-demand library. You don't have a handout, but the patient perhaps asks you a question about something, and you know that there's a video title that addresses that, and you also know that you've got to do meds for 6 other patients right now. So how would you turn that video into active learning?
Exactly the same way.
Okay.
Say, oh, I've got a video that has the answer to your question,
Mm-hmm.
and you can watch it, and then we'll talk about it after, and make sure that you got your answer that you're looking for.
Yeah, and you can also set up the video the same way you set up the handout by telling them what to look for, because we've seen that patients that are given some specific instructions prior to watching the video do better remembering than patients that don't. Give them something to write on, a little notepad or something, then come up with questions or write keywords, and that helps the nurse engage much better when they come back. Because the teaching is not done by the video, it's done by the nurse or the educator, or in this case the nurse educator, pulling it all together and then using teachback to find out what the patient actually has learned and if it's correct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the more senses you get involved in the process of learning, the more ways it's remembered in the brain. So having a video is actually quite helpful because it's using another set of input.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I hope folks get a good sense of how the whole concept of no time to teach can help you capitalize on these little teachable moments where you either have got to convey something or answer a question, and rather than just passively teaching with just giving information and walking out, or giving a handout or giving a video, you can make those much more actively make them active participation to involve the patient, personalize it, and make it more meaningful. If I'm rambling so much today, I hope I'm conveying that message properly. But I think that's real helpful to really understand the difference between active and passive learning, because very little learning is going to take place in a passive environment. If you think about times you've spent in a classroom listening to a teacher go on and on, you're not thinking, your brain's somewhere else, unless you're actively engaged. It's the same thing with patient education, I think, except you're dealing with more stressors.
Exactly. So it makes it even harder to learn.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'm going to recommend that folks watching, if they have not done so, pick up your book. It's available wherever books are sold in paperback and digital form. Go to Amazon, or if you want to make a bulk purchase, you can go to your publisher, Prentice and Hull. It's p-h.com, and you can get a sizable discount on a bulk purchase. Why don't you tell folks where they can find you online, Fran?
I have a blog at www.notimetoteach, and I'm on Twitter at notimetoteach.
Okay, and I'll also point out that you are also frequently on Facebook and Pinterest and Google+, because I see you there. And for folks that are interested in perhaps having a video-on-demand system in their hospital, you can get a hold of us at synergybroadcast.com, or you can Google MMDS, which is our medical media delivery system, and we're happy to tell you all about how to use video in patient education as a tool. And we'll put some links to Fran's book and some other information in the show notes today. So, Fran, thanks very much for your time. I look forward to talking to you next time.
Okay, bye, Chuck.
Bye-bye.